This week on Quality Digest Live, it's 11 a.m. Do you know where your documents are?
Yes, I do.
You do?
I do. Plus, we ponder the world of the self-employed. That and more when we come back.
Welcome back to Quality Digest Live for October 28th, 2011. QDL is your weekly look at who and what is making the news in the world of quality. I'm Mike Richmond, publisher of Quality Digest.
And I'm Editor-in-Chief Dirk Ducharme. Well, before we get to the feature stories this week, let's take a quick look at a couple of news lines that caught our editor's eyes. First, MIT's Lincoln Laboratory has developed a new radar technology that will hopefully soon let tomorrow's warfighters literally look through walls. According to the researchers, until now, radar hasn't been able to penetrate walls well enough to show what's happening behind them in real time. But Lincoln Lab researchers have built a system that can actually see through concrete walls up to 8 inches thick, giving an instantaneous picture of what's on the other side, like maybe people. At video rates of 10.8 frames per second, the system shows where a person is behind the wall and how far away they are from it. The system, researchers say, can be used at a range of up to 60 feet away from the wall. Demos have been done at 20 feet, which researchers say is realistic for an urban combat situation.
Great. Well, in our next story, Gartner identifies 10 top strategic technologies for 2012. Now, one of the strategic technology concepts that we thought was interesting was the Internet of Things.
Very interesting stuff.
Very interesting. What's that? Well, it's when physical items such as consumer devices or physical assets are connected to the Internet. Now, the idea has been around for a couple of years, but the number and types of things that are being connected has really greatly accelerated recently. So some key elements of the Internet of Things include embedded sensors that detect and communicate changes not just in mobile devices, but in an increasing number of places and objects, like, for instance, a coffee pot that calls you to remind you that you left it on. Great idea.
Be a good thing.
Image recognition technologies that identify objects, people, buildings, places, logos, anything that is value to consumers and enterprises and marketers.
I think maybe especially marketers.
Mostly marketers.
Most marketing,
definitely.
Yeah.
Smartphones and tablets equipped with cameras have really pushed this technology. Finally, here's one to make you worry a little bit, maybe, perhaps. Near Field Communications, or NFC payments. NFC payments allow users to make payments just by waving their mobile phone in front of a compatible reader. Could be dangerous.
Yeah, new app, recent app out from Google called Google Wallet, and that's exactly what it does on certain phones.
Just make sure you don't do it near Tiffany's.
Yeah.
For more info on these stories, please go ahead and follow the links below the player and read all about them.
Okay, now let's turn to our first feature article this week. Have you ever been in a situation where you need to locate an electronic file or document and found yourself unable to lay your hands on it?
Sure.
Of course you have. It happens to me all the time. This story is actually based on an article that was written by Mario Gislau. Where did I save that file? Now, Mario works for Olympus, Olympus NDT, I believe. And this article, what he talks about is software that enables particularly those people who work with imaging microscopes to keep track of the images. Now, let me back up a little bit. Let me say why I was interested in this, why it caught my eyes. I'm a photographer. I used to shoot a lot in film. Now I shoot all digital. And of course, as anybody who does any kind of photography, whether you're a professional or amateur, you know that with digital cameras, it's so easy to rip off 300, 400, 500 pictures at an event because, hey, it's cheap, it's easy, it's reusable. And so I have like maybe 10, 20,000 images right now sitting on CDs, DVDs, hard drives. I had to create some sort of ad hoc little database program to help me find where these images are. So I understand what they're talking about here, except for people who use microscopes for analysis, materials analysis or inspection, they're probably taking hundreds and hundreds of thousands of images every year. And the problem they have is they don't just need to track, oh, what was it a picture of, which is maybe what I would do. They need to know who took the picture, when was it taken, what kind of lighting was used on the microscope specimen. Was the specimen stained? What kind of contrast methods did they use? Are there any documents associated with this image?
That's a big one.
That's a huge one. It's not just the image; it's everything associated with the image. You know, maybe notes from the inspector or the person doing the materials analysis. So it becomes a much bigger issue on how to keep these images and the information surrounding the image, and maybe even the project that the image reports to, or multiple or thousands of image report to, and keeping those in a format, in a database that allows them to be easily archived and easily retrieved and found, even months or years down the line.
Well, and that's really important too, because a lot of these projects we're talking about here are long-term projects.
They can be very long-term projects and involve, you know, tens of thousands of images. And so what Mario talks about in this particular article, as I said, Mario works for Olympus. And I got to say, Olympus is an advertiser with us, but Olympus isn't the only company that makes the type of software that he's kind of generically referring to in here. Any of the major microscope manufacturers have image analysis and archiving software that does basically what he's talking about here. And what he's stressing here is the importance and some of the functionality you can look for. So, for instance, one of the main things is being able to the operator to be able to easily archive the image and anything associated with the image. So most of this software now comes as a plug-in module that plugs into your existing image analysis software, whatever it is, that provides this archiving and searching function. And among other things they allow you to do is to, once you've entered in the key terms for the image or the project you're doing, is that as you're taking images or shortly thereafter, it will just simply auto-archive those with all the relevant keywords and all the information that we discussed earlier with them. So the operator doesn't have to stress about it every single time he takes a picture. It's kind of a one setup deal. Now every picture he's taken is being auto-archived with the relevant information. The other thing that's really critically important to this, saving the information is one thing. Retrieving it later, that is really the huge issue, and that's really where this type of software comes into its own. And that's when 6 months down the line, a year down the line, maybe the project is nearing its end, or maybe if it's materials analysis, there's a failure, right? And somebody says, okay, we need to pull up all the information on this material that we analyzed and thought it was safe, thought we had understood the stress and so forth on this material. Where are those image analysis, materials analysis images that we took?
Yeah, and this is at that point, it's really a taxonomy issue. I mean,
it's a taxonomy issue, exactly. So now you've got to go in and you have all these fields that have a taxonomy related to them, or they can be free-form fields, which are simply notes maybe taken by the operator, and you can search by those. You can search by, let's say, well, we know that Joe was involved in this project. We know what the project name was. We know about what time these images were taken. We know the material. So you can start plugging, kind of like a Google search, you can start plugging all these into your database search and bring up out of hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of images by this several years down the line, and zero in quickly on the images that are relevant to the problem you're trying to solve.
What you're trying to solve. Yeah, really fascinating, and it's amazing to see the development of this technology.
Well, it's really been, I think it's really been driven, as I said, by digital photography. When you were just talking about, it was hard enough with film, but at least with film, nobody was taking thousands and thousands of pictures because it was difficult to do. I mean, you took a roll of film and it had to be processed, and then eventually had to be scanned. So this type of thing just really speeds up the process and makes it easier.
Great. Well, great. That's interesting. Really interesting story, and the kind of thing we love to cover.
Yeah, nice little technology piece.
Great. Well, thanks, Taryn. Thank you for that. Well, I had a feature article that I wanted to cover this week, which appeared actually in Monday's issue of Quality Digest Daily. And the title of the piece is "One is the Loneliest Number," written by our own Taryn Margin. Now, "One is the Loneliest Number" is based on a book by author Melissa Priegel entitled "Become One." And Become One deals with this issue of basically, as Melissa calls it, becoming an independent or a consultant. It's something that you can look at as a challenge or an opportunity for many of us, or many of you out there in the industrial space. So what we're talking about, what Melissa's talking about, and what Taryn is talking about in her piece is this idea of the kind of transition and what skills you need to have and how you need to approach this segment of your career, perhaps. So I'm joined by Taryn now, and Taryn is going to speak with us for a few moments about the story, about Melissa's book. Taryn, you started out in your piece talking about the tone of the book, her voice, and it's kind of a slim volume, but it's really very well written and very well presented. So what was it about it that really drew you in?
I believe that it was her tone more than anything. Being a word person, I'm first caught by that, and I very much appreciated that she came across so realistically and a little with just enough touch of humor to kind of take the panic feeling out of something that's got to be an issue for a lot of folks. Sure.
And it's, as we talked about a little bit, and you talked about in your piece, that this is a reality right now of what's going on in the economy for a lot of people and a lot of organizations, that there's been some downsizing, and there's a lot of really good people. So how do those good people start thinking about that transition, especially in the quality space? What skills do they have that help them make that transition?
Right. I think that folks in the quality world, perhaps without realizing it, nose to the grindstone as most of us are, have a lot of marketing skills that they don't perhaps realize they can take with them when they find themselves in a quality department that no longer exists.
Maybe.
The idea actually too that quality has been doing its job very well over these years, and more I think the quality function is being built into production or service. Mm-hmm. So the idea of a separate department maybe be going the way of the dodo.
The dinosaur, sure.
We don't know. But in any case, those skills certainly can be reused and redefined elsewhere. I think the notion that was brought up by Mark Thomas, I mentioned him in the piece about the zombie economy and the 4 Ps that were so necessary now he was speaking in terms of companies, that they need to prioritize and pare down, and what was the other, the postpone. A lot of those, if you slot in the quality skills into those 4 Ps, you realize, well, actually they're talking about some things that I'm very familiar with.
We've been doing this for years, sure, why not? And the other thing, and that's our first kind of Halloween reference, that zombie economy, the zombie consumer you talked about. The other one is the idea of slashers, not the kind of slashers we see on Friday the 13th or Halloween, but slashers, that people that are doing many roles. They are baker, candlestick, butcher, baker, candlestick maker, right? So, and quality people really are like that. If you look at what you do every day, you don't really just kind of focus on one little thing. You have very much of a big picture, and you're doing a lot. Mm-hmm. So how does that slasher mentality maybe morph into being an independent or a consultant, do you think?
Well, for instance, you can take those quality skills that you've been using. Anyone in the quality world can attest to starting their day out in the boardroom, trying to problem solve from more of a financial point of view, and then minutes later find themselves on the production floor looking at actual widgets that are behaving strangely. I mean, that's a agility. And again, talking about Mark Thomas's take on the economy, he said that there were 3 things that are going to help. He was, again, speaking of companies, but I think it applies to people who are considering becoming independents, and that you need to either have the position of providing the lowest cost item, or a certain agility, and now obviously only one company or one person can hold that lowest cost, and if you think you're going to compete on that level, well,
yeah, there's going to be a lot, the race to the bottom, as they call it. Sure, exactly. You don't want to be in that death struggle. You want to be able to provide value.
So that brings you back to the agility idea, and how actually a lot of quality people are agile in what they do.
Sure, you have to be. And because, as you said, I mean, we're all doing a lot of different things, and the agility and the understanding that the skills that you have and the ability to be flexible and walk into a situation and make an impact very quickly is a great skill for a consultant or an independent, as we talk about. One other thing I wanted to mention was, this isn't, in many cases, or many times, in few cases at all, is this where you're going to just go from being an employee at an organization to being an independent off doing something else and somewhere else that you don't know. Many times you move from being an employee to being a consultant for that same organization. So you have a lot of built-in knowledge and tribal knowledge of what that organization brings to the table, which is really
and
important
the
too.
whole idea of innovate or die doesn't have to imply doing something completely radically different. You know? Sometimes it's a matter of taking a section or a market segment and saying, well, what can I do with that, you know? And then getting back to Thomas's 4 Ps, you want to look at how do I bring those 4 Ps? How can I help people manifest those 4 Ps? So, for instance, I'm just brainstorming here, to prioritize whether you're working with a single person or a company and you're consulting, you know, that's, to me, that sounds suspiciously like low-hanging fruit, and that's something that we, you know, I've heard a lot about in the quality world. So there's a skill that you can help them with. And
the auditing function. I mean, really, in terms of outsourcing and bringing something to the table that you know really well, you know, looking at a particular process or a segment of the organization from an auditing viewpoint is really valuable. That brings a lot of value to the organization. So that's a way of ensuring that what you're doing really carries that value. And you know, it's exciting if you think about it. I mean, you think about the idea of becoming an independent, becoming a consultant, and really, you have much more freedom. I mean, there's much more risk in many cases, many ways, but there's that freedom of being able to focus on what you really love and what you really want to do. And that's enticing. That's what I really liked about your piece. I thought that was really, really cool.
I think and Melissa brings this out very well in her book, the idea that if you can do what you love, people pick up on that. You know, there's a certain feeling that comes across with somebody who is totally in love with what they do. You know, I mean, you can tell when you go into a commercial setting and there's someone who actually loves being a salesperson and a people person. It feels good. The interaction feels good.
It comes across. It really does. Great. Well, thanks, Taryn. Great article. I encourage everyone out there to read that piece. Check it out. Again, it's below the player. It's on the player right now, and you can check it out. Just go and click on that, and after the show's over, of course. Don't do it right now, but check it out and read Taryn's article if you haven't read it before, and check out Melissa's book. Again, Become One, I should say. Really interesting, slim volume. You can read it in a few hours, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So great, thank you again, Taryn. So Dirk.
Well, yeah. Well, hey, by the way, thanks. That's a nice interview with Taryn.
Taryn, one of my favorite people.
Exactly.
You know, great writer, great editor. Taryn, if you want, you know, you encouraged people last week to go back on our site and get content by an author. Taryn's got some great pieces on our site.
So. Yeah, by the way, anytime you want to find something on our site, whether it's an author or a topic, if you notice in the upper right-hand corner of our webpage, there is a search box. It works very well. This is a Google search that's built into our site, and you can type in a name like Taryn Margin, for instance, and you would find any articles written by her come up. So, okay, so next week we have, on Tuesday, we have an article by statistician Don Wheeler, and he's looking at rare events, which is an interesting problem. From the perspective of data analysis, rare events are really problematic. And for instance, Wheeler describes this particular scenario. Suppose you're looking at spills at a chemical plant, and over the past few years, a plant has averaged maybe 1 spill every 8 months. So you say, well, that's not too bad. So you start to do some statistical analysis on it, but kind of a thumbnail sketch is if this plant is averaging 1 spill every 8 months, then those months with a spill will be 700% above average, right? Okay, so if you're doing any kind of analysis, these numbers kind of look really bad. And that's the problem with rare events, is they kind of really skew the data. So how do you deal with rare events? And that is the topic that Wheeler is discussing. Don Wheeler is discussing next week in Tuesday's column. So be sure to look at Tuesday's QDD to read all about rare events.
To check that out. Don's pieces, of course, everyone out there pretty much knows Don Wheeler.
Yeah, Don is an expert, the eminent expert in his field, and his statistics articles are really well read. So
yeah, so definitely check that out. Okay, well, before we close, I want to give congratulations to the winner of our October Haiku U contest. And that was Cor Tancre. And we want to read, I'm going to let Dirk read Cor's winning haiku. Go ahead, Dirk.
That's right. Remember, a haiku is a Japanese poetic form, 5 syllables, 6 syllables.
No, 575.
575, there we go, see? Here is
That's why yours didn't win.
Here's Cor's, as voted on by our readers. Cor's winner is, quality is more than doing things the right way. It's a way of life. And
like
that was the one. That was the one that was voted on by you guys and our readers. And good job, Core. Actually, we did have a couple others that were pretty interesting
We had
as well.
several great ones.
Yeah, we do. And let's actually let's touch on a couple of those. I'll stay on this. I love this one. ISO comes from France, but is held in Switzerland, based on a Greek word.
The United Nations of Haiku.
That's right.
And Haiku, of course,
is Japanese. So yeah, there we go.
There you go.
Japanese form. Okay. Another one. In control or not, there is a chart for that too, if you'd but use it. And finally, this is just a sweet one. My quality plan. 7 kids and a wife at hand. Life is paradise. Yes.
We like those. So thank you for everyone who contributed Haiku. Congratulations again, Core. You have a $50 gift card on the way to you. So thanks for doing that.
That's right.
Well, before we wrap up this week, we're going to wrap up here in a moment, but I wanted to read, I think we got a letter in from a viewer, and it's a viewer who actually also happens to be a contributor of ours by the name of Paul Naismith. If you've watched the show and if you've been reading QDD in recent months, you've noticed Paul, who is clean shaven.
He's clean shaven.
But he wrote us, and Dirk, if you want to read Paul's comment to us.
Sure. As for Dirk and Mike's video last week, they were too kind to include my article at the start of the video. I am now growing a beard in their honor as a way of mutual appreciation.
Well, you know,
he's a very slender man. I think he's also, as he describes himself, as like really, really tall.
He's tall. He's a young man, and he talks about his wife often in his pieces.
I think he referred to himself as a praying mantis.
Well, maybe. I don't know. Maybe.
With a beard.
With a beard, but not with a beard. But you know, I want to say before we move on that you know, quality, as we know, is all about conformance to requirements. And in the case of marriage, it's conformance to
your wife's requirements.
Yes. So, Paul, before you grow that beard, check with your wife, because you might find her with a razor in her hand one night when you're sleeping. So.
Oh, and by the way, there's a birthday today.
There is.
In case nobody knows, 125th birthday for.
I don't know.
She's the symbol of our nation.
Oh, the Statue of Liberty.
That's right. 125 years today.
1886. Well,
there we go.
Thank you.
Little trivia for you.
Well, congratulations, Lady Liberty. Well, thank you.
Right.
Thank you, Dirk. Thank you, all of you, for joining us this Friday. Look out next week for another great week of Quality Digest Daily, of course, with Don Wheeler's piece on Tuesday. And look out next Friday for another edition of Quality Digest Live.
See you then.
See ya.
Thank you.